Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I'm here to bring you my recommendations for horror and thriller books that are set around Christmas and the winter time. These are perfect books to read when it is cold outside. I've done many of these recommendation videos before, so I'm going to have a link to a playlist down below and in the cards if you want to check out even more books on this topic. But I really enjoy these kind of videos, I really enjoy these kind of books, and hopefully I can provide you all with some more recommendations this year. All that being said, let's get started. Now, the first book I want to talk about is Stranded by Bracken McLeod, and this book is technically set in the summertime, so it's a little bit of a cheat, but it takes place in the Arctic, and so I thought that it was a perfect book to recommend to read during the cold winter months. This story follows a ship of fishermen who crash into the Arctic and have to survive. They are running out of rations, they are running out of supplies, and everyone on the ship is getting very, very sick. And so a few of the people go out to seek help and try to find out what they see on the horizon, because it appears to be perhaps another ship, and so they go and explore, and I will leave it there as to what they find. This is a book, again, that has that cold weather setting, even though it is set in the summertime. In the Arctic, it just never really gets that warm, so you still have the discussions of frostbite and snow and ice and all of that, and this book definitely gave me those cold weather feels. This is a horror book, and it's a little bit of a divisive one because it has a very significant shift in a later section, and so the book does not go where you might expect it to. I really enjoyed it. It's a little bit ambiguous, it's a little bit weird, and it leans into things that I really enjoy seeing in my horror books. So hopefully you'll enjoy it too, or at least experience a really good page turner, because it is a really fast read and definitely one that I personally recommend. Next, I want to talk about Swashbucklers by Dan Hanks, and this is a book that follows a small town that back in the 80s had a gas leak, supposedly, that caused people to hallucinate and see monsters, and several people died in the situation. However, a group of kids in the 80s didn't believe that that was the case. They believed that the monsters were real. And now the story is set in the present day when these kids are now adults and people are beginning to die again, so they return back to this small town. They get back together as a group and believe they have to fight the monsters once again. This is more of a dark portal fantasy, but is very much inspired by the tropes of horror, specifically those of Stephen King, so you're going to see a lot of nods and winks to books like it. And so if you enjoy that but want more of a fun, entertaining take on it, this one I definitely recommend. And the reason I'm including it in this video is that it's set all around Christmas time, and Christmas is very much in the background of the story, so it's not a book you have to read at Christmas, but it's kind of like one of those movies you watch where in the background of the scenes there's Christmas trees and references to Santa Claus and all of that. So it's not so in your face that you can't read this in January, but if you do get a chance to read it in December, this is definitely a great one to read because it has just a little bit of hints of Christmas, but it's very much this horror fantasy novel that is so entertaining, so much fun. I gush about this book all the time, and it's for a good reason. Next, I want to recommend The Girl Who Died by Ragnar Jonasson, and this is a book translated from Iceland where the story takes place. We follow a young woman who is from the city, but she decides she needs a fresh start, and so she takes the opportunity to take a job working as a teacher in this very small, isolated community that is far away from the main city. And there she is instructed to teach the only two children there, and she gets to meet the town, she gets to meet the residents who are all very quiet and keep to themselves. This book is very atmospheric, and within the story you find out that this town has a history, the place is possibly haunted, and when tragedy hits, they have to figure out who is all behind what ensues. And this is a book that I want to recommend because of the Iceland setting, which again is full of ice and snow and cold. And again, specifically what I love about this author is that he writes very slow burning atmospheric books that are very character focused. I found the main character to be very relatable, the idea that she's trying to start fresh and start anew. And then you get to meet the other characters who are all very interesting. And you just again get the sense that they are very far away from the larger life, and they just are really restricted in what they have access access to. And it makes for a good, almost a closed room mystery setting because again, you know that there's only a limited number of suspects when the dark and terrible things happen. And so I liked puzzling that out. I thought it was very enjoyable. It's not the kind of mystery that is going to have you flipping the pages. It's not a page turner, but instead just one that you will want to spend time with, cozy up around a fireplace. And I do think it's perfect to read during the cold winter months. Next, let's talk about Near the Bone by Christina Henry, and this is a horror thriller book that follows a woman who is living with her husband on the mountainside. They are very isolated and keep to themselves. One day, the woman discovers some sort of tracks. It appears that there are other humans or people on the mountain with them. Her husband wants to keep her away from them for reasons, and so the story follows them. And this is a story that is both a kidnapping story, and then it also has an element of a supernatural being potentially being on the mountainside with them. And I really like the blend of the two. So this is a book that I would recommend for those of you that like thrillers, again, with the themes of surrounding kidnapping, because it's very central to the story. The main character is very likable, but she is also very naive because you find out that she has been living alone for so long and has very limited access to technology on the outside world and is very much controlled by her husband. And then again, you have the possible presence of something out there, something supernatural that might be hunting them. And I love that balance. It was very creepy. It was also very fast paced at the same time because you have a narrative that is moving forward. I just flew through this book. I think I read it in a single day, and I definitely think it is a great one again to read during the winter because up on the mountain, again, they're dealing with the cold weather and all of that is part of the setting. And again, I just love the possibility that there was something knocking at their door. There was something outside the window. And I think this one would be great to read on a cold, blizzarding day. If you get the opportunity, this would be a great one to pick up. Next, I want to talk about The Overnight Guest by Heather Guggenkauf, and this is more of a thriller. This is told over a few different timelines and perspectives, one being a true crime writer who is going to write in this isolated cabin. When they hear noise outside, they go out and discover there is a young child. The child appears to be mute, and they bring them in and try to figure out what happened to the child, where are their parents, and the story goes from there. You also get different perspectives set back in the past, and it's an enjoyable story because I did have to puzzle through how they were connected together. It wasn't necessarily obvious at first. You kind of have guesses, and I will just say that I think this author is just a really good storyteller. I found this book to be very compulsive. I read most of it once again in a single day because I just wanted to know what was going to happen, and I just found it to be overall very enjoyable, well plotted, and entertaining. So I thought it was really the good balance of everything I look for in a thriller. And again, because of the setting of the true crime writer, being surrounded by a cabin on a blizzarding day, you have that atmosphere, that weather that you're looking for this time of year. And so if you get a chance to read this book, I definitely recommend doing it during the winter months because I really thought that, for me at least, when I read it last year, it really gave that perfect atmosphere I was looking for. Next, I want to recommend Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. And this is another thriller. This one is set in Scotland. We follow a couple that are going there during the winter to have a weekend away and try to work through their marital problems. The story is told mostly from a back and forth between the husband and the wife's perspective, but then we also get perspectives of these letters that this wife was writing every year for their anniversary to her husband, and so those are interspliced, kind of giving the backstory to the couple. I enjoyed this one for the most part, and what I liked about it is the fact that because of the way that perspectives were split up, you would only be limited to know what the certain perspective was telling you as the reader. And then when they shift perspectives, you often would reframe what you had just read. And so you would realize that what you thought you were reading in the last perspective wasn't actually what it appeared to be. And I really enjoyed that setup. There were some really smart narrative choices that made this book very entertaining. I will admit that I wasn't completely in love with the ending, and it did somewhat take down my enjoyment of the book overall. Some people love this one, some people hate it. It's kind of controversial, but if you're looking again for a winter thriller, this one again is set in Scotland. It talks about the snow and the wind, and it very much is part of the story. So if you want those aspects, this is definitely the time of year to be reading a story like this. And like I said, while it wasn't perfect, I did overall enjoy it, and I do recommend it if you haven't tried it. It's worth checking out for yourself, and hopefully you will love it as well. Finally, I want to talk about Misery by Stephen King, which yes, most of you have probably heard about, but I actually forget that it's set during the winter. This book follows a famous writer whose car breaks down and he gets rescued by a woman who tries to nurse him back to health. Of course, you find out she's rather crazy, and her version of nursing him back to health is really somewhat different. And I gotta say, I have a bad rap for just not always loving Stephen King's books, but there are some I really did enjoy when I read them, and Misery is one of them. I thought it was quite enjoyable. It's very fast-paced. It's very terrifying, the setup. In a lot of ways, I would call it more of a thriller than horror, although it's certainly horrifying, but it doesn't lean as much into the supernatural, and instead it's just this very closed room, claustrophobic story between this man and this woman, him trying to outsmart her, but really being stuck in a situation where he doesn't have the opportunity necessarily to escape, and so he is forced to comply with her will as she forces him to write more of his work for her. And I just love the craziness of it. I think it's just, again, a propulsive book, one that is going to just keep you turning the pages, flying through, and it's one of his shorter works. And like I said, I don't always love Stephen King, but this is definitely one of those exceptions. I think this book is really solid, and like I said, I forget that it's set during the winter, but it is, so if you do have a chance to read it or have been meaning to read it for a while, I definitely think that this time of year is the perfect time to check it off your list. So that is it for this video here. I would love to know, of the books I talked about, which ones are you planning on checking out for yourself? And don't forget, I have even more recommendations on Christmas and winter horror, so don't forget to check them out in the cards and description box if you want even more recommendations. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing. I do read a lot of horror thrillers as well as science fiction and fantasy. You can help me out by giving this video a thumbs up, sharing it around online, dropping a comment, even if it's just a little snowman or a snowflake. And if you hit that little notification bell, you'll never miss another video from me. Otherwise, this toque is super hot, so I'm gonna take it off. It is the same toque that I wear every day outside because it is freezing outside in Canada where I live. But besides that, I'm gonna go for now, and I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.